A father races through the night, his son's breath fading with every mile. But inside the emergency room, he comes face to face with the one person he never thought he'd see again. The doctor, who once held his heart, now holds his son's life in her hands. What happens next will change all three of them forever. Stay till the end, because sometimes the past is the only way forward. The early morning sun spilled through the cracked blinds of a small two-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. The radiator clinked and hissed, trying to keep up with the November chill. Daniel Hayes, 34, stood at the stove, flipping pancakes with one hand and checking the time on his cracked phone with the other. Grease stained his faded work shirt, and the dark smudges under his eyes betrayed another sleepless night. In the next room, a small voice coughed, harsh and dry. "Eli?" Daniel called, dropping the spatula. He rushed in. His 6-year-old son lay curled under a fleece blanket, cheeks flushed, hair matted to his forehead with sweat. Daniel sat beside him, feeling his son's forehead. Burning. Again. "Buddy. Still not feeling good, huh?" Daniel whispered, brushing Eli's hair back. The boy opened one eye and managed a small smile. "My legs feel heavy," Eli murmured, his voice barely audible. Daniel's heart clenched. This wasn't just a cold. It had been almost a week. Low fevers, fatigue, no appetite. He'd hoped it was just a bug, a cheap thermometer, bad sleep, anything but what it might really be. But money was tight. Too tight. He worked 12-hour shifts at Coleman's auto shop, scraping by on hourly wages and occasional overtime. Since Eli's mom left 4 years ago, walked out one stormy night and never came back, it had just been the two of them. No family nearby, no safety net. The ER. That was a last resort. He still owed $1,700 from the last visit, and the bills came in monthly like clockwork, reminders that even emergencies had price tags. "I'm okay, Daddy," Eli whispered. "Can I still go to school?" Daniel tried to smile, swallowing the fear rising in his chest. "Not today, little man. We're gonna take it easy, all right?" Eli nodded, eyes already drifting shut again. Daniel sat beside him for a moment, listening to the faint wheeze in his son's breathing. He checked his phone again. 7:48 a.m. If he didn't leave now, he'd miss the morning shift. No work meant no paycheck. He stood, paced the tiny living room, ran a hand through his hair. He picked up the phone and hovered over the contact for the garage. He couldn't risk losing the job, but he couldn't leave Eli like this either. With a sigh, he dialed. "Hey, it's Dan. I'm sorry, man. I can't come in today. My kid's sick." A pause. "No, I understand. Dock me. Whatever it takes. I gotta be here." He hung up and sat on the floor next to Eli, his back against the couch, head resting in his hands. Outside, the city moved on. Cars honking, buses rumbling, dogs barking. Inside, everything stood still. He didn't know what was wrong with his son, but something inside him, maybe the same thing that had helped him raise a boy on his own for 6 years, told him this wasn't just a virus, and that something was about to change. The room had grown dim, despite the mid-morning hour. Daniel sat in silence, eyes fixed on Eli, who now slept fitfully, damp curls stuck to his forehead. The boy's breathing had shifted, slower, more labored, and the color had drained from his lips. Something was wrong. Daniel rushed to the medicine cabinet, rummaging through empty cough syrup bottles and expired Tylenol. His hands shook. No thermometer, no insurance, no time to second guess. A sudden, sharp cry made him spin. "Daddy!" Eli whimpered from the couch, clutching his chest. His small body curled into itself like a crumpled paper. That was it. Daniel scooped him up without another thought. He didn't bother to grab a jacket or lock the door behind him. He wrapped Eli in a blanket and ran, not walked, to the beat-up 2007 Dodge parked at the curb, its engine coughing to life after 3 tries. Every red light felt like a betrayal. By the time they reached County General, Eli's head was slumped on his father's shoulder, his eyes glassy. Daniel burst through the ER entrance like a man possessed. "Help! Please! My son! He can't breathe!" Nurses rushed forward, taking Eli from his arms and placing him on a gurney. Monitors were clipped to fingers. Oxygen fed through a mask. One nurse gently tried to steer Daniel to the side, but he resisted. "I need to stay. He hates hospitals. I just need..." He's scared. The double doors swung shut, cutting him off. And just like that, he was alone. Daniel collapsed into a waiting room chair, chest heaving, hands stained with oil and fear. He stared at the tiled floor, unable to pray, unable to think. He hadn't been here since... Number. He wouldn't go there. Not yet. A nurse returned, after what felt like an eternity. Her tone calm but firm. "We stabilized him. He's resting, but the doctor will want to speak to you." Daniel nodded, too afraid to ask what was wrong, too afraid to hear the words. Then the door opened. A tall woman in a long white coat stepped into the room, clipboard in hand. For a split second, Daniel didn't recognize her. The clean bun, the serious expression, the air of command. But when she looked up, his world tilted. It was her, Isabella. Time slowed. She froze too. Her breath caught. The clipboard nearly slipped from her hand. They hadn't seen each other in over a decade. Not since senior year. Not since prom night. Not since she left town for med school and he stayed behind with a broken dream and a pregnant girlfriend. Their eyes locked. A lifetime hung in the space between them. "Daniel," she whispered. He couldn't speak. Could barely breathe. "What? How?" she stammered, eyes flicking toward the hallway. "He's your son?" He nodded, chest tightening. Her expression shifted from shock to grief to something deeper, something she quickly masked behind her professional demeanor. "Come with me," she said softly. And in that moment, Daniel knew. This was no coincidence. This was fate, walking back into his life with a white coat and the power to save everything he loved. The sterile room seemed to shrink around them as Daniel stared at Isabella. The years hadn't erased her features. They had only sharpened them. Her voice, her posture, even the way she held the clipboard. All of it hit him like a freight train. "I didn't know you were back in the city," he finally said, his voice low, strained. "I wasn't," Isabella replied, gently. "I transferred to St. Mary's last year, after my mother passed. This hospital is where she had her last days." There was a silence. Daniel nodded, swallowing thickly. "I'm sorry." "Thank you," she said, her gaze dropping to the chart for a moment. And I'm sorry, too, about Eli. We'll do everything we can. He's stable for now, but I need to run more tests. He's strong, though, like someone I used to know. Daniel managed a ghost of a smile, but his heart was twisting. 15 years ago, they were inseparable. He was the mechanic's apprentice, with oil-stained fingers and big dreams. She was the top student in her class, full of ambition and purpose. They met at a charity fundraiser at the community center. She spilled coffee on his jacket. He cracked a joke. She laughed. That was it. Love bloomed fast and deep, but life didn't wait. Daniel's father died, and he had to step up at the shop. Isabella got accepted to Johns Hopkins Medical School. Neither of them wanted to end it. But long distance, late calls, missed birthdays, it all wore them down. Eventually, she stopped calling. He never reached back out. Now, here she was, not in his memories, but standing in front of him and treating his son. I didn't know you had a child, Isabella said softly, her eyes still on the chart. Yeah, Daniel replied, voice cracking. His mom left when Eli was 2. Said she couldn't handle being a parent. I didn't have a choice. He saw something flicker in Isabella's eyes. Grief, maybe guilt, or admiration. You raised him alone? Daniel nodded. Best thing I've ever done. Hardest, too. She sat down across from him. He's lucky to have you. I think I'm the lucky one, Daniel said. A beat passed between them, heavy with memory. Unspoken words hung like fog in the air. You seem different, Isabella said after a while. Quieter. Daniel exhaled. Life will do that to you. She nodded. Yeah, it will. A nurse entered, breaking the moment. Dr. Reed, ICU needs you. Isabella stood. Daniel, I'll check on Eli myself. I promise he's in good hands. Their eyes locked one last time before she walked out. And as the door closed, Daniel leaned back in the chair, running a hand through his hair. His son was fighting for his life, and the woman who once held his heart was now the only person who could save him. Fate, it seemed, wasn't done with them yet. Eli's condition worsened overnight. What began as a respiratory infection had triggered a severe autoimmune reaction, a rare inflammatory syndrome that was attacking his organs. Isabella stood beside the hospital bed, her brows furrowed, voice calm but urgent as she explained it to Daniel. He's in a critical window, she said. We've stabilized him for now, but he needs a plasma exchange and possibly surgery if the swelling doesn't reduce. We need to act fast. Daniel's heart sank. Is he going to make it? Isabella's eyes didn't waver. We're going to do everything we can. But it's going to be tough, Daniel. I need you to be strong. For him. She saw it. The fear in his eyes. Not just the fear of losing his son, but the fear of losing the only thing he had left. Isabella took his hand. He's a fighter, like his father. Daniel didn't answer. He just nodded, eyes fixed on the little boy in the bed, hooked up to tubes, machines hissing in rhythm like a countdown. Hours turned into a blur. Isabella led the team through test after test, consulting with specialists, reviewing scans, pushing for approvals. She skipped breaks, never left the floor. Every time she looked at Eli, she wasn't just seeing a patient. She was seeing his child, their past, the life they almost had. Meanwhile, Daniel paced the waiting room, checking his phone constantly, even though no one was calling. He stepped out to call his manager at the auto shop. "I can't come in today, or tomorrow. My boy's in the hospital." The response was cold. "We can't hold your shift forever, Dan." He hung up. He didn't care. All that mattered was Eli. That evening, Isabella returned. Her scrubs were wrinkled, her eyes ringed with exhaustion. "We're prepping him for the plasma exchange," she said. "The hospital's covering most of it, but there's a catch." Daniel stood. "What?" Isabella hesitated. "There's a new trial, cutting-edge treatment. It could help Eli recover faster, prevent further damage, but it's not fully covered. You'd need to approve it and sign off on a partial payment." Daniel swallowed. "How much?" She paused. $12,000. He stared at her, stunned. "I don't have that kind of money. I barely keep food on the table. I don't even own my truck. It's leased." Isabella looked away. "I'm sorry. I can try pulling strings, but the hospital board—" "I'll figure it out," Daniel interrupted, his voice hoarse. "Whatever it takes." He left the hospital that night with a list of charities, loan numbers scribbled on paper, pawned his tools, sold his phone, tried every contact in his book. Nothing came through. Exhausted, he returned to the hospital around midnight, slumped into a chair outside the ICU. The vending machine blinked beside him. He stared at it, but hunger felt irrelevant. Just then, Isabella walked over, holding 2 cups of black coffee. "You look like hell," she said, handing him one. "Feels like it too." They sat in silence for a minute. Then Daniel whispered, "He's all I have, Isa." She nodded slowly, her voice cracking. "I know. That's why I haven't gone home in 2 days." Daniel turned to her. "Why do you care so much? You don't owe me anything." She looked down, swallowed hard, then met his eyes. "I walked away once. From you. From what we had. I thought my career had to come first, but I've regretted it every day since." Daniel didn't speak, but the pain in his eyes told her everything. "I'm not walking away again," she said softly. "Not from you. Not from him." And in that moment, between the flicker of fluorescent lights and the beep of distant machines, 2 broken hearts began to stitch themselves back together. Because sometimes life gives you one more chance, but only if you're brave enough to take it. The night faded into morning, and Eli was wheeled into the surgical ward. Daniel stood beside his son, holding his tiny hand, whispering words of courage through a tight throat. His palms were rough with work, but his touch was gentle, the way only a father who'd held his baby through storms could manage. Isabella stood across from him in full surgical gear, eyes locked with his before she disappeared behind the OR doors. The wait was unbearable. Every second dragged like a lifetime. Daniel paced the corridor, sat, stood, prayed. A nurse came by with updates. Stable vitals, good response, final phase starting. Finally, hours later, the doors opened. Isabella stepped out, face exhausted, but eyes bright. "He's going to be okay," she said softly. Daniel staggered back against the wall. For a moment, he couldn't speak. His knees almost gave out. He covered his face with his hands, not in fear, but in overwhelming relief. He was still crying when Isabella placed a hand on his shoulder. That night, he sat beside Eli's bed, watching his chest rise and fall in peaceful rhythm. His color had returned. The monitors beeped steadily. "I don't know how to thank you," Daniel whispered, looking up at Isabella. She smiled faintly. "You don't have to." There was a pause. Then she added, "You once asked me if I'd ever want kids. I said no. I was scared. Of failure. Of the past. Of us." Daniel chuckled under his breath. "Yeah, I remember." "I was wrong," she said, "about everything." Silence lingered between them. Then Isabella knelt beside him. "Daniel, if you'll have me back, not just as Eli's doctor, but maybe as something more, I'd like to try again. I've spent years fixing strangers' lives. Maybe it's time I help rebuild ours." Daniel looked at her, his voice low but sure. "I never stopped loving you." They didn't kiss, not yet. But the way their hands found each other, slowly, gently, said more than words ever could. Weeks passed. Eli recovered faster than expected. He began sitting up, smiling, asking questions. His laughter returned, first in small bursts, then like sunshine through clouds. The hospital room changed too. It wasn't just machines and meds anymore. It had drawings on the walls, a stack of comic books, and a photo of Daniel, Eli, and Isabella smiling together. Eventually, Eli was discharged. Daniel returned to work, part-time at first. But now he had help. Isabella had reached out to a private practice for Daniel's referrals. His schedule became flexible. Bills stopped drowning him. He and Eli moved into a small but clean apartment. Not fancy, but home. And Isabella? She became more than just the doctor who saved his son. She became the person who healed him. One Saturday afternoon, the three of them stood outside a park. Eli ran ahead, chasing bubbles with other kids. Daniel turned to Isabella. "He called you Mom yesterday," he said quietly. She blinked fast. "Did he?" He nodded. And then, for the first time in a long time, they allowed themselves to dream of a future not burdened by what they'd lost, but shaped by what they'd found again. A family. A second chance. Because sometimes the people we lose aren't lost forever. Sometimes life brings them back when we need them most.